The wet, horrible days have returned, as you can see, with the rain on the window, just in the utility room with the back door and garden. By the way, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I really wanted to talk about interviews today and how over time, I don't know if it's because as you become more experienced, the interviews become less interesting, shall we say. But I remember sort of in the early 2000s going to a few interesting interviews that were about interesting topics. And it may also be the fact that, these days there's a lot less new applications being thought of, and most of it's about kind of implementing changes. But anyway, these interviews, I mean, to give you kind of some examples, I remember going to one that was about robotic warehouses, so creating the technology that managed these robots within warehouses, picking items and stuff like that. Although they weren't robots that walk around. I think they were probably on wheels. I can't remember, it's been a long time ago. That was kind of around year 2000, I think, if I remember rightly. I remember going on an interview where the company produced underground sensors that would be used in kind of facilities as security, and if people walked over the sensor, it would self-alarm. I remember an interview where the Sky TV boxes in the UK, if you don't know what they are, they're basically, I say satellite, they don't even use satellite anymore, do they? Although there's probably still some old ones that do, but they use streaming devices these days. But anyway, the advertising for that was run via an application within the box, and this was to do a job to do with that. I remember going to a job for digital TVs, in fact, actually, where they, in workplaces where they have these TVs, create the software for that. What else? What else was interesting ones? It's been quite a few. I've been on a few that did encryption, where they encrypted for, I presume it would go to armed forces and stuff like that, but I think it was anybody that needed sort of encryption, they wrote the encryption software. I did an interview with a gaming company once, that was interesting. And with that interview was, if you have a player that's standing at X, a tank that's at Y, travelling at 70 degrees angle away or towards you, I can't remember which one it was, something like that. Calculate where and you would have to shoot at what time and how to hit the tank. Basically, it was all about math, about kind of working out a player and where to shoot at what angle to hit a tank that's travelling away or towards or wherever, at a different angle. Because that was quite an interesting one. That was actually with quite a big, it wasn't a big game company, but they wrote at least one or two big games. They wrote, I remember, a very popular helicopter simulator at the time, which slips my mind because, again, this is in the early 2000s. I think that may have been, again, about 2000 maybe. There's been a few. And a lot of these were all about new products. Some obviously were enhancements to existing products, but they were interesting. But a lot, not saying that work isn't interesting these days, but a lot of the interviews, because it's about enhancing products, a lot of them would be like, it'd be write the same thing in Java, basically. I think I lost count of how many times I had to write an application that was all about the same type of, basically it was the same question but rewritten, and then that was it. That was kind of, like 3 tiers of interviews, and it wasn't like interesting interviews, it was just like the same questions. I must admit, the job that I'm in now, the interview was completely different, and that's probably why I liked it, because a lot of it is just, interviews aren't interesting anymore. They aren't asking interesting things or trying to get you to interact. From my perspective anyway, they seem to have gone a lot more mundane. It's like a task, or it feels like a task. Whereas before, I used to enjoy going to interviews, especially these interesting roles of robotics and encryption and TV box embedded stuff. I remember another embedded one I went for. It was it sounds like quite boring, but these machines they go around with in supermarkets and they go beep to figure out the price if it needs to be repriced. Remember going for an interview again very long time ago on that. They did those. So yeah, they were really interesting. Some really interesting interviews back then. And I'm not saying there aren't some now. There are probably companies out there that will give really good, interesting interviews. I just haven't found any for a long time. So yeah, if you've been to an interesting interview more recently, then why not share? It'd be interesting to find out if there are these interesting interviews, these companies that are doing interesting things still out there. Maybe just I'm in the wrong place and haven't seen any for a long time. So yeah, it'd be good if you could share, and I'd be interested to find out. That's all for this week. I'll speak to you next week. Bye for now.